I'm Emily Rowney.
And I'm Alisha Holland.
This is Bill Camp, the voice of Forensic Files 2 on HLN, and you're listening to Murder in the Rain.
A teenage couple went across the Canadian border into the U.S. to run a quick errand. They would never be seen alive again. Today, I will be telling the story of Jay Cook and Tanya Van Cuylenburg, how their murders sat unsolved, gathering dust for over 30 years, and how their case became groundbreaking in the world of DNA and criminal cases. To help tell their story, we will be speaking with Rachel Ford, the public defender that worked with the man accused of committing these heinous crimes, as she shares her experience with the case. We will also be sharing bonus forensic content, as Josh and I will be sharing our interview with Bill Camp and Nancy Duffy, the new narrator and executive producer for the new Forensic Files 2, and how they are bringing forensic science into the 21st century. It was November 18th, 1987, when Jay Cook and Tanya Van Cuylenburg set out for a multi-country road trip. That sounds much more exotic than it actually was, as the young Canadians were merely venturing across the border into Washington. But for the lovebirds, it was an exciting excuse to get out of town. Dating for only 6 months, it was clear to both Jay and Tanya's families that they had something special. The couple was always at one of their family's houses, and all of the parents were pleased with the choice in partner their child had made. Even Tanya's dad, father to a beautiful 18-year-old girl dating a 20-year-old boy with a very fashionable mullet/emo haircut, wasn't apprehensive about her spending time with him. Meeting at Oak Bay High School, it wasn't until right around the time Tanya was graduating, earlier that year, that the two had begun dating. It wasn't hard to see why the two were drawn to each other. At 6'4", with long dark hair that found its home atop his broad shoulders, Jay was the classically tall, dark, and handsome type. He had some odd jobs, as most 20-year-olds do. He worked in a pizza shop and on a fishing boat. He had a coy, quiet smile, but was always quick to laugh. Tanya's feathered for the gods strawberry blonde hair complemented her bright smile. At a mere 18 years old, she was starting a new post-high school phase in her life, but she was more interested in saving up for a trip to Holland than she was in finding a job and settling down. She was compassionate, especially towards animals, and had a bit of a collection of them. From pet gerbils and cats to fish to her golden retriever Tessa, her love of animals was apparent. Her brother John, whom she was beginning to have a true adult friendship with, noted that he felt she probably would have ended up in a career working with animals. Together, the couple loved music. She casually played guitar and loved U2 while he played bass. On top of that, they both enjoyed sailing with their families. Even just by looking at pictures of the couple, you can see where their differences may have actually complemented one another, where Jay's introverted quietness was countered by Tanya's extroverted brightness, the yin to the yang. November 18th, 1987, Tanya and Jay packed up Jay's dad's bronze 1977 Ford Club van and made their way out of their Saanich neighborhood. Jay participated in the family tradition of waving to his sister until he had rounded the block. Leaving from Victoria, British Columbia, they took the Coho Ferry to Port Angeles in Washington. Once there, they took Highway 101 south but missed the exit to the Hood Canal Bridge, so they changed their route to take Allen as to get to Bremerton. From there, they took another ferry to Seattle, in which they arrived around midnight. With the entire trip being about a 4.5-hour drive, it was expected they would get to Seattle, spend the night in the van, get the parts and money order for Jay's dad's business in the morning before heading back home. But red flags were raised by the following afternoon when no one had heard from either Jay or Tanya. Now, a girl after my own heart, it wasn't unusual for Tanya to be late for things, but what was unusual and had her family concerned was that she didn't do what she normally did when she was late. She didn't call anyone. At first, Jay's dad thought they might have run off to elope. John, Tanya's brother, was not worried. They were basically kids. Of course, they were taking their time getting back and not getting in touch. Then, when it became nighttime and no one from either family had heard anything, they became alarmed and contacted police. A search began in the Seattle area and the families joined. Then, 6 days later, a body. It was Tanya's. She was found down an embankment, her bra pushed up but still wearing her shirt and jacket. She was naked from the waist down, and she had been shot in the back of the head and raped. On the road near where she was discarded, there were white plastic zip ties. Tanya's family was searching further south from where she had been found in Algiers, Washington, which is just south of Bellingham. Her brother John was asked to be the one to look into the glass window and identify the body of his now deceased sister. It is a moment he continues to carry with him. Jay's family was called and informed of Tanya's death. The hope they had for Jay to be found was completely depleted. Where was this 20-year-old boyfriend who now had a dead girlfriend? Should they keep looking for his body or start to look at him as a suspect? The following day, on November 25th, the van was found 14 miles away at a Bellingham parking lot. Inside the van were zip ties similar to the ones found at Tanya's scene. There were also conflicting accounts on a pair of Jay's pants being found in the van that potentially had DNA on them, but we'll get more into that in a bit. Also in Bellingham, Tanya's wallet and keys were found casually disposed of under the porch of a local tavern. It was the next day, 8 days missing, on Thanksgiving of 1987, when Jay's body was discovered by hunters. He was in Monroe, Washington, 60 miles from where Tanya's body had been recovered. He had been bound with zip ties, beaten with rocks, strangled with twine and dog collars, and a pack of cigarettes and a tissue were shoved in his throat. Chief Deputy Ron Panzero of the Skagit County Sheriff's Office worked the case initially. Taking in the scene, he felt he had seen something like this before, that the killing of Jay actually looked like something that would have taken place in a prison. So initially, he felt he would be looking for someone that had been in the prison system. Along with the body, they also found a half-empty box of ammunition, a pair of white/clear plastic gloves, and additional zip ties. There was a sense that these items weren't left out of haste, but more so to taunt the officers, as they were left as decoration and a show of arrogance, a bit of a "you won't find fingerprints here because I wore gloves."
Is that common in general in prison, or was it a specific thing he saw?
I think from what I gathered and how he said it, it was kind of like the beating aspect and the things down the throat to like keep you quiet. That it had these aspects of like, if you're going to beat someone in jail, you're going to make sure they're quiet and you're going to, so
okay,
it
that
had
makes sense.
Those elements.
I wasn't sure if that's what
yeah, there wasn't anything more
or
like,
if he's like,
markings.
yes, I know this exact murder.
No, it was more like, that's the vibe he was getting of like keeping him quiet. And
there's more to it than just killing him.
While during the investigation, prints weren't found at either scene where the bodies had been, there were prints, finger and a palm, in the van. There was also semen found upon further investigation of Tanya. They had DNA, only this was 1987, and it really didn't count for much.
But they still collected it, right?
They did.
They were aware people are trying to make progress.
Correct. Piecing the story together, officers felt the couple must have met the killer on the ferry. It was late at night and probably not all that crowded. Perhaps he saw the young and potentially naive pair and approached them, asking for a ride to Seattle before leaving the ferry with them. Then, once deciding to go through with his plan, he zip-tied them, took them to the area he wanted. Walking Jay away and quietly strangling him, he potentially went back to Tanya and explained that he let Jay go and would do the same for her if she followed his directions.
Now, were they able to pinpoint the ferry schedule and which ride they were on?
They were. They had their tickets and everything, and they had their receipts and information from the ferry, so that's how they knew they got into Seattle. It was right around midnight. Examining the evidence further, some started to suspect this could be more than a one-off incident. The perpetrator was cocky and prepared. He risked taking 2 hostages, one being a healthy, young, tall man. He purposefully left things behind and came prepared with ties and bullets. What and who exactly were they dealing with?
So at this point in the investigation, are they considering more than one culprit?
Not so much that, more so a concern of multiple victims.
Right.
Is this guy a serial killer? Because he had all this stuff. There didn't appear, from anything I read or saw, that there was ever a time that they were thinking it was more than one person. It was more so tie her up, set her somewhere, and then go. That's, again, the strangling and the things in his throat to be quiet. And then she doesn't hear that he's been murdered so that she wasn't frantic. Initial reports and sheer desperation had people on the lookout for anyone wearing a jacket that matched the description of the one taken from Jay and the day pack taken from Tanya. That didn't lead anywhere. Once newspaper reports came out, more than 230 names were put on the list of potential leads, but nothing lined up. Then, a month after the murders, the families received letters, greeting cards.
Ugh.
They were filled with graphic, detailed information about the murders. While hopeful this could lead to a break in the case, there wasn't much to go on except stamps and handwriting. So these greeting cards came, and the writing is very distinct, where parts of it are almost cursive and other parts are bold fonts. They're
Like block lettering?
like block lettering.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll have pictures of
Kind of
the
sounds like how I
sample.
write.
No, I hope you don't write like this. This does not look like a healthy person's writing, but we will have the picture on our blog. Dearest Jay's father, or Gordon Cook. Greetings and salutations. Hallelujah, bloody Jesus. I am the happiest human being on planet Earth.
Oh my God.
In fact, I am on a Michael Jackson victory tour celebrating my victory.
Ugh.
So that's just a little snippet.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, and again, it's literally like, Dearest Jay's father, or Gordon Cook. Greetings and salutations. Like, it's
Ugh.
all over the place. With a discouraging lack of evidence and nothing but dead-end leads, the case started to go cold, then went completely stagnant. As the years started going by, the only glimmer of hope to catch the perpetrator was in the letters, 19 of which were delivered in the 30 years since this case was unsolved.
Oh my God. Just constant taunting.
Usually on holidays, they had different, not stamps, what's it called? Postage markings.
That is so effed up.
Seattle, New York, all over.
That's a little bit shocking that someone is that into their crime and hasn't moved on
Right.
to a new one almost.
Right. However, eventually, DNA caught up, and investigators were able to get some from the letters. None of the DNA matched that of what had been found at the crime scene.
What?
This was just a case of someone clearly struggling from some sort of mental health issue, tormenting the family for unknown reasons for nearly 30 years.
Did they get any punishment?
No, because it's just the DNA. Like, it's not
They'd
even
have to do something.
matched to anything.
They'd have to be convicted of something to get their DNA
Right.
elsewhere, or familial match if
Right.
somebody were interested. But
Right.
oh my God, that makes me so mad.
Yeah, so it's just some person, and they stopped eventually. But
And we've talked about that before, how we think that's something you should punish.
yes, because it's
that's horrible.
horrific.
That is harassment and it's abuse.
It's not only like, you think you're reading this letter from the person that potentially killed your child, writing terrible things. Like, even if it's not the graphic nature of what they wrote about the killings, but just what you're reading, that hallelujah, bloody Jesus and all of that. And you're thinking, okay, well, at least maybe there's a fingerprint or maybe there's DNA, and then they get it off the envelope and then it's nothing. Like, just so disgusting on so many levels.
Humans are
the worst. Fast forward from 1987 to 2015. Chelsea Rustin, a computer programmer in Seattle, decided to do what so many of us have done, send in an ancestry kit. Once she received her results, she did what so many of us have done, posted it to Facebook. It was there that a family member suggested that she put her information into GEDmatch, the public DNA database. Intrigued, Chelsea looked into it before deciding to share her information. She did, and eventually just forgot all about it. In 2018, technology had allowed for Parabond Labs to create a photo mock-up of what they believed to be the person whose DNA was at the scene. The families held a news conference and presented the photos, hoping someone would recognize the face and be able to place them in the area. What they got were about 100 more leads that provided no new information. While the photos didn't provide any leads, there was a lead from the DNA, and later that year, there was a knock at Chelsea's door. It was the police, and they wanted to talk to her about a 31-year-old murder case and how her family member was involved.
Oh my God. Can you imagine what's going through her head right then?
Of like, could you be more specific? Is it
First
my dad?
of all, you're opening the door to police. That's never a good sign.
Right.
And then that. Oh my God. We really need to upload mine, by the way.
Yeah.
See what comes out of that.
You know you got some shady stuff in your blood. It was April 24th, 2018, when a man was arrested and charged with being the Golden State Killer. Detective Scharf, now head of the Cold Case Division, decided this could be the answer for so many of his cases, including Jay and Tanya's. Connecting with Parabon Labs, Cece Moore, a genetic genealogist, was assigned with connecting the branches of the family tree in hopes of finding a suspect. This process isn't foolproof, though. The odds of getting a match are better than running DNA through the regular system, but it is not a guarantee. That's why when she found a cousin to the DNA sample, she was elated. She then started to connect the dots. This was a second cousin to the murderer. Cece was now looking for the male second cousin to Chelsea. Tracing back, she found William Earl Talbot and Patricia Peters. They had married and had 4 children, only one of which was a male.
Mm-hmm.
His name was William Earl Talbot II. As a child and into adulthood, William had always struggled with anger issues. On one instance, he kicked his sister until she called the police. A different occasion was marked by him beating a different sister so badly she was hospitalized. He had been estranged from the family for over 20 years by the time the police learned his name. He was now a 56-year-old truck driver and lived within 7 miles of where Jay's body had been found. The detectives were very optimistic. This could be their guy, but they would need to match the DNA, so the police started following him.
I love this part.
You know where this is going.
So
Trash
good.
time. Then, with luck on their side, they pulled up to a red light. Waiting behind Talbot, the officers watched as he inexplicably opened his truck door, maybe to spit or to litter, and a white paper cup fell onto the road. Talbot didn't pick it up, but the police did. Running a test as fast as they could, it was found to be a match to the DNA recovered from Tanya's body. They had their man. Going in for the arrest, there were 9 officers covering 3 divisions. Detective Jim Scharf had worked on this case for over 15 years, and he was the officer that had the pleasure of placing the handcuffs on the accused.
Oh, that must have felt good.
The first thing Detective Scharf did was to call the parents of Jay and Tanya, saying, "Guess what, guys? I've got him in the back seat of the cruiser."
Did he send a picture too? I would have.
I don't think he did. That's why you're not a detective.
Is that why?
That's one of the reasons. While the Golden State Killer was the first arrest made based on public DNA, William Talbot's was the first to go to trial. This was groundbreaking. So in June of 2019, he went to court. His defense was that, yes, there was his DNA in or around Tanya's body. It was from consensual sex, and there must have been someone else that came along and murdered them.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Very likely scenario.
Okay, sir, you can go home.
Yeah. It wasn't a surprise when the jury came back with their verdict, guilty on all counts.
State of Washington versus William Earl Talbot II, verdict form 1. We, the jury, find the defendant, William Earl Talbot II, guilty of the crime of first-degree murder as charged in count 1.
I didn't do it.
What you just heard was the verdict being read, and if you happen to watch that video, it's available on YouTube, you'll see that a hand goes on William Talbot's shoulder. That hand belongs to Rachel Ford, who is a Snohomish County public defender, who we are very excited to get a chance to speak to, and hold on to your butts, everybody, because there are some bombshells that are about to be dropped. Given that your job, especially now, there's not really anything resembling typical, when we're out of quarantine, so, 2 months ago, the before times, what would kind of a typical day look like? Or, just kind of walking through being a public defender.
Sure. Right now, I'm the supervisor of the felony unit, but when I was representing Bill Talbot, I was one of 2 attorneys that was assigned exclusively to his case. Because this was originally a death penalty case, the Supreme Court rules allow for 2 full-time attorneys. You have to be on a special panel of people who have been selected by the Supreme Court as qualified to represent people in these types of cases. I was not on the panel, but my co-counsel was, John Scott. In fact, while this case was pending, so after it was charged, the Supreme Court issued an order, I believe it was the Gregory case, and said that the Washington State Supreme Court Supreme Court said that the death penalty was unconstitutional.
Okay.
So because of that, then this became a life without parole case. But because we were already funded for 2 dedicated attorneys, the Office of Public Defense kept us on.
Okay.
Certainly the stakes were less in that our client wouldn't be killed at the hands of the government if he was convicted, but he was still looking at in fact, serving life without prison without the possibility of parole.
Being put on this very high profile case, it's well known, it's decades old, it's the first one going to court with DNA. How do you, on a personal level, kind of manage those emotions, especially with something as serious as this case was, and when there's DNA attached? And so your at home feelings might be different than your work. How do you kind of manage that?
I've actually never felt a conflict between what I personally feel about a case and what I am ethically obligated to do as a part of my job.
Mm-hmm.
It is the most outstanding privilege to be able to stand up next to someone who has no voice other than your own. And especially someone facing charges as serious as this, they are literally in the worst position that they've ever been in their entire life. And so to be able to sit down with that person, get to know that person, hear their side of the story, if they have one. Sometimes, like in this case, it was so hard to piece together a story that occurred 30 years ago in the 1980s, before we had cell phones, before people, conducted every financial transaction via debit card.
Right.
Even just trying to work through that, but also to be a support emotionally for my client.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Talbot was absolutely shocked to have been in this position. It came out of nowhere. He had no inkling. He was coming out of work on the day he was arrested, and a police officer approached him, asked him who he was. He told him who he was, and then promptly arrested him. Can you imagine what that would be like to be someone who has lived a life without crime, without regular contact with the criminal justice system?
Right. And just out of the blue.
Kind of that grief of my life has changed. I mean, I think, I think sometimes, we forget that people who are arrested for crimes had lives outside of the things that they're accused of, and many times did not even do the things that they're accused of.
Mm-hmm.
Even so, he was a hardworking man, had been regularly employed most of his life, had owned a home, had a few close friends who were very loyal to him, but wasn't someone who was flashy or out there in public or had made a huge imprint on society in general.
Right. Not any kind of attention seeker, and now to be in the spotlight.
Yeah. So it's, being there for him emotionally is also a heavy burden, but it's a privilege to have too.
Yeah.
When you are the only person that in the world where someone accused of any sort of crime, but especially one like this, can talk freely to, it's something that you want to make sure you're available for and can provide. And I've never felt any conflict between being able to provide that professionally and having personal feelings about the charges or crimes in general.
Yeah. And your emotional support is very evident. I've watched the clip of when the verdict is read and his response of saying, I didn't do it. And immediately your hand is just there on him, in that moment. What's going through your mind?
Well, my hand was there because he was falling.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I've been a public defender for almost 15 years. That has never happened to me. Never once. I've had a lot of clients who have been in that moment where the verdict is read and the verdict is disappointing to them. I've never had a client pass out. And that's what happened. So he basically just fell back. His eyes rolled back in his head. He just slumped, essentially. I've never been in a position where I had to actually try to catch my client physically as he was falling after a verdict. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, a very intense moment, I'm sure. Approaching this case, if there's anything that you want to speak on as far as the fact that it was the first case to go to trial with the familial DNA, or just kind of the magnitude of it and what that meant to you and these new hurdles for you to approach in your career?
The DNA, the ancestry, GEDmatch, all of that stuff was not as big of a piece of this case as I think a lot of people still believe it was.
Oh, okay.
They used the genetic genealogy to develop a lead. Sometimes law enforcement uses tips, like a tip line. I know that they did in this case. They had aired it on those crime shows, America's Most Wanted.
Yeah,
and all
it was
that
on
kind
everything.
of stuff. Yeah. And, had gotten a lot of tips in response to that. So that's one way law enforcement generates leads. The next, sometimes they consult psychics. They do all sorts of crazy things. But insofar as it doesn't infringe on any person's right to privacy, then those leads can be pursued. So what they did is they developed a lead through the genetic genealogy, and then they followed my client around until he discarded, actually it was a coffee cup that rolled out of his truck. They picked it up, they tested it for DNA, and then that's how they developed probable cause to arrest him. So it was obviously the thing that led them to suspecting my client of the murders, but it wasn't used as a part of the evidence in the trial, except that it was used to explain why they started following our client around.
Oh, okay.
We also felt it was important that the jury know that they developed a lead through this technique rather than developing a lead because someone said that they overheard him talking about it or believed him to be of the murderous sort of person or, anything else. Literally, there was no connection between my client and the murders except for the DNA associated with the female victim. Defense attorneys and the defense position in general is always an uphill battle in terms of public opinion. Even though the system is set up to be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, we know that that's not true in the way that the public reflects on people accused of crimes, and also the way that the system does in practice by jailing people pre-trial, by setting bail, setting conditions on them before they've proved a single thing, shows that the presumption of innocence is not uniformly applied.
Right.
As lawyers, we're not supposed to try our cases in the media. So there are ethical rules that prevent lawyers from talking about their cases publicly prior to the trial.
Right.
There, of course, are still ethical rules that prevent lawyers from talking about their cases even after the trial if it's regarding confidential information. But at this point, everything's been out, and Mr. Talbot always agreed early on that we could respond to things that were levied against him in the media. Okay. So that's what we did. We took a position that's consistent with our ethical duties to only respond and never to proactively go out and try to taint a jury panel or provide Mr. Talbot's, defense prior to the trial. And that's because of our ethical rules. But it also puts us at a disadvantage because police officers and, like in this case, the genealogist was so eager to go and tell the world how clever they thought they were in figuring out who the murderers were, when really they only figured out who had sexual contact with that female sometime in likely a week to 10 days before she was murdered. That is all they figured out.
Yeah, I think that's a totally valid point. If you step away and kind of take the emotion out of everything and look at it and say, yes, what the evidence is showing us is that, and that's it. So it's hard to hear because you look at the case and you do get wrapped up in everything that happened. But when you're looking, legally speaking, that's what you're being given.
It's there's no doubt that these two young people were brutally murdered. But if they think that they've figured out who did that, they're just fooling themselves and they're fooling the community.
So you feel that the case is unsolved, really?
Absolutely.
Oh my.
Yeah, I mean, what everyone should be worried about is the real murderer still out there? They have not. They have not connected anyone to the murder weapons. They haven't recovered any murder weapons. They provided no motive. They provided no opportunity. I mean, really, what the families of these victims and society in general should be concerned about is that the real murderer is still out there.
Wow. That I'm kind of speechless. I mean, obviously you did your own research going into the case. Do you have anything where you feel that it looks, oh, this is potentially a serial killer, or anything leading other, in what you found, where did you find things that maybe led other directions?
Absolutely. So in the discovery, which is all of the sort of reports and investigation that the prosecutor turns over to the defense, and they're required to, is hundreds of investigations that make a whole lot more sense than Mr. Talbot. And there were things that we tried to get into in the trial that the judge wouldn't let us get into. But early on in this situation, the law enforcement officers involved in this investigation consulted the FBI to develop a profile of the type of person who is likely to have committed these crimes. And Mr. Talbot doesn't meet any of these profiles in the slightest. There was, I don't have it in front of me, but essentially it was someone who, the way in which the crimes were committed was someone who likely had a military background, some sophistication with guns. They suspected even law enforcement at one point. Someone who likely has committed several offenses. The brutality of the offenses themselves indicate that this is not a isolated or one-time situation for the perpetrator of the crime. And all those things make sense from a psychological perspective. I mean, those things can be, those things can be misleading themselves sometimes, but there is just not one piece of the puzzle that connects Mr. Talbot in any logical way to these crimes. What makes much more sense is that this is the 1980s. It's before the AIDS epidemic. It is before people started, if you're in your 20s and you, like many people in their 20s, are living a lifestyle where they might have multiple sexual partners. They're not necessarily worried about tracking it at this point. We're not in a situation where we're taking selfies with people we meet at bars, or have GPS tracking devices that could maybe account for our whereabouts. So if you think about someone who may have led a lifestyle where they would regularly meet people in a casual setting and have sex with them, there's no way to recreate that 30 years later. And that is the only connection. The semen DNA is the only connection between our client and the female victim, and there is absolutely no connection whatsoever between him and the male victim.
Yeah, and the evidence does support the sophistication that you spoke on, the zip ties and the gloves and having all of those things there. That doesn't seem like a crime of opportunity.
No, but it doesn't at all. I mean, it seems like something that someone would have to put together some sort of kit of things. And none of these things were things that people who knew my client at the time knew him to have access to, particularly weapons, or he didn't work in any sort of like profession that would have had those zip ties. Although, I'm not sure the zip ties are all that special.
Right.
Given, even in the 1980s, you could buy them at, any supply store. So
they weren't like a magical thing that appeared.
Yeah, I remember playing with those things in my dad's garage, just at the house growing up, and he'd always get mad because I would, ruin them by zipping them together. So this isn't that special, but what it is, the area in which the male body was found, they tried to make a huge connection between that and where my client's parents lived at the time, but overlooked the fact that was literally less than a mile from one of the state penitentiary that holds the most violent offenders in our entire state. There was a lead that police didn't pursue because, or essentially they eliminated everyone based on the DNA. So as soon as they got that DNA profile, it didn't matter how connected you were otherwise to the story or to the crime. If you didn't match the DNA, then you weren't the guy. And there was a couple people that even one who is said to have confessed to the killings, who once they finally test their DNA, they eliminated based on a non-match of the DNA. Despite the confession, despite the opportunity, this person was a violent offender, was in the area, had served time in Monroe, had recently been released, but he was exonerated based on the DNA non-match. They also early on developed a theory that the perpetrator was also Canadian or headed towards Canada for some reason. I mean, not just because the victims were Canadian, but there was a theory about perhaps like some sort of trafficking of property or drugs or something like that. And there was a lead of someone who got on a bus just over the Canadian border and then tried to sell someone a firearm that was the same type as the one that the bullet had. Yeah. And again, that actually, I don't even know if they were able to, if that sort of just went cold because at the time they didn't, this was before they even had DNA to even try to match it. So, but there's just so many other possibilities of who actually did this crime that make a whole lot more sense than William Talbot.
Right. So is he currently in the appeal process?
Yes.
Okay. And whatever you're allowed to speak on, where are you at with that?
I'm not doing the appeal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he has different lawyers, who are specialized in that area.
Okay.
Of taking over the case. And I think it's always good to have a second set of eyes on too.
Absolutely. Yeah. The more people that can look at it. And just to clarify, not to cancel anything you've said, but to make sure that my information was correct, in doing my research, did find that he had a history of being like the two separate cases of assault with his sisters. I don't know that they were ever charged, but that was spoken upon. I just want to make sure that my information is accurate.
So there was an allegation. He was also a child. This is a family that did not have a lot of resources and had a lot of, I would say, tumults growing up. And yes, the police were called one time when he hit his sister or something like that. He was a child and she was a child.
But then when you're charged with murder, it becomes you assaulted your sisters, and they, it gets a bigger
right. There's an allegation of assault on one sister when they were both children. I the idea that this can all be illuminating to a murder allegation is almost laughable.
Right. That is so fascinating. Yeah.
Think about it.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I hit my sister as a kid too.
Right.
I mean, but I wasn't living in a socioeconomic situation where police would be called.
Right. So, and there was something also that I had read about there being DNA, William's DNA on one of the zip ties. Is that accurate as well? And that was after trial, was my understanding, and just shared with some jurors, and they were kind of relieved because then it sealed the deal because they were kind of unsure. I don't know if that's anything that you're familiar with, or
it's outrageous is what it is. It's outrageous. So essentially all of these things have been packaged together for 30 years. And one of the zip ties was packaged with a pair of her underwear, the female's underwear.
Like in the same evidence bag?
Yes, for 30 years, like floating around together. And
wow.
And and actually we asked to have that underwear retested during the process because our belief was that, our client's sexual contact with her was completely divorced from, the brutal murder that befell her in the days after that.
Right.
And we wanted, if there was DNA, our client's DNA on her underwear, it would show that she had, at least she had put her clothes back on.
Right. And then that led to the cross contamination.
Right. I don't know if they tested it or not, but then in the middle of trial, they came up with a new software that has not been tested or approved by court or meets what's called the FRI standard in Washington State to be scientifically reliable. But nonetheless, they retested not the underwear, but the zip tie that had been floating around in the same bag as the underwear for 30 years. And then somehow decided that there was a trace amount of our client's DNA on that zip tie, which would have been completely consistent with his DNA being on her underwear, which is what we believed always was the case.
Right.
So the fact that that was spun like that to give the jurors some sense of release is really troubling.
And was there any way to show that that was from semen? Like, were they able to say that DNA on the zip tie was from semen, or they just found
it was
fluid?
It was such a small amount.
Okay. They couldn't tell.
And at this point, I don't even know. I mean, it wasn't even pursued because it came out in the middle of trial.
Right.
It was not time to retest.
Right.
Everything, and I'm not sure it would have told us anything other than what we already believed, which is that he had sexual contact with her.
And he admitted to that, correct?
He never testified, but our theory of the case was in agreement that he had sexual contact with her, had sex with her at some point. And, semen can stay in the vagina, can certainly stay, if it's been on clothes, it can stay there for a very long time, but it can even stay in the vagina for up to 10 days after intercourse. So it's, and then the other thing that gives you sort of pause is that there was another male DNA profile on that vaginal swab that did not belong to Mr. Talbot and did not belong to her boyfriend, Jay Cook.
I'm sorry for the pause. I'm literally speechless. So was there not enough there to test?
It was a partial profile. It was enough to tell that it was a male, and it was enough to tell that it was not William Talbot and it was not Jay Cook.
And all of this was presented at trial?
Yes.
That's some reasonable doubt right there.
It sure is.
Holy cow.
It sounds like a strong case for an appeal.
This has totally, I expected you to come in and just talk about the difficulties of a public defender and, this case being this big deal. I did not expect it to kind of totally change my outlook on it. Because
well,
that's a lot of information.
I'm glad I did then, if that was the unintended.
No. And again, that's why I so much appreciate talking to you, because for our listeners, so often it's true crime and here's the information, and it's once it's all packaged in a pretty bow and you're undoing it to explain how it got there. So to hear, that this is the outcome. And
I'm not sure, technology is changing in the world of DNA, as we know, all the time. At this point, I'm not sure that third unknown male profile is sufficient to ever actually create a different match. But DNA. What we know, so to actually discover whose DNA it was, but we know it was not Jay Cook's, and we know it was not Bill Talbot's, and it was taken from her vagina, and we know it was a male.
That is fascinating and heartbreaking and shocking and a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, I really do feel for the family. I know they, were certainly traumatized, and the sister particularly of Jay Cook was upset with, my cross-examination and that whole, that's hard for me too. I see them as mourning family members of people who truly were murdered, and in a senseless way, from anything I can figure out. And so that's always difficult to sort of take on that anger from someone else. But really what I hope that they can see at some point is that this case is not solved. And if they really are concerned about figuring out who killed their brother and sister, there's more work to be done.
Right. Because you end up getting all their transference of this anger and hatred and sorrow for all these years when really you're continuing to fight for them just in this different realm.
Right. And I can see how they couldn't see it that way too,
Well,
but
yeah.
as a human being, but at the same time, by defending an innocent person, uh, is not gonna help or hurt their anger
Mhm.
and their hurt and what has gone, what it must be like to have gone through what they did and finding out that their loved ones were murdered.
So with the kind of notoriety of this case, it was just recently featured on the new Forensic Files. Do you ever watch or listen to anything about this case, or is it too enraging to hear that all of this is left out and that it's not as accurate as it should be?
Well, I mean, again, the good story is, these innocent kids and this man who was brought to justice. The good story from the media's perspective, right?
Right.
Finally 30 years later, and this heroic cop who solved the crime, and this, genealogist who put new, technology to use and all that kind of stuff. That's the story people want,
Right.
and it's the story that makes people feel good.
And I can sleep at night because this monster is off the
Right.
street. Yeah.
Right. But what people have to remember is the monster may well still be out there.
Right.
I didn't watch the Forensic Files. I didn't even know it was on, but my mother-in-law texted and was like, "Oh, I just saw you on TV." And my friend one of my friends from law school, who's a public defender in Nashville, she saw it and she texted me too. But it's not that I avoid it. I don't seek it out though.
Right. And also, do you need to relive this thing that's kind of gone through that media processor to come out nice and shiny and relive all that stuff again?
Yeah. Well, and I think about, it's not just really reliving it for me personally. I think about my client.
Right.
People watch those shows in prison, and I think about what is it like for him. I've had some contact with him since the verdict, but not a lot, just because I think it's important for him to focus on his relationship with his appellate lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
But, when I see that, it's not the pain for me that comes up, it's the pain for my client. And that just utter bewilderment when that verdict is read, and he thought it was going to be read differently. I thought it was going to be read differently. And then just to have him just like say, "I didn't do it,"
Mm-hmm.
and then pass out in my arms was something I will never forget, but I will never forget it for him.
Do you have anything for you that you wanted to promote or talk about, whether it's something you're doing or working on, or a website or a charity, or literally anything that we can?
Yeah, the Northwest Bail Fund.
Okay.
The Northwest Bail Fund is a nonprofit organization, not at all connected to my office, except that they have been doing amazing work in getting people out of custody and home safe with their families, away from risk of contamination for this virus. We've done a lot of work in getting bail reduced and getting people released on conditions other than bail. But for the ones that we get reduced to something like $500 or $1,000 or $1,500, when really the only difference between them and freedom is their own poverty.
Mm-hmm.
The Northwest Bail Fund has been stepping up and bailing these people out, and it's been amazing.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm not sure if you saw, or I'm sure you've heard of the documentary Time, the Kalief Browder story.
No, I haven't.
Oh my gosh, it's on Netflix. I saw it a few years ago. It's produced by Jay-Z, and it was soul crushing. And I'm sure you've heard the story. It's this kid that literally was wrongfully accused for taking a backpack, and then he ended up in the system for like 2 or 3 years.
Oh,
he
yeah,
was in
because of bail,
solitary. Yeah, it was all about bail, and he was in solitary confinement at Rikers, and it just destroyed him. And it is the most heartbreaking thing I've ever watched in my life. So that's awesome to hear about Northwest Bail and how they're helping to.
Yeah, I mean, that was I swear that was the difference in the Central Park 5 case.
Yes.
The Corey was the only one that didn't get out. and he's the one who got the worst result. I mean, didn't get out pre-trial.
Yep.
And he's the one who clearly got the worst result, and that's not a coincidence.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot that needs to be changed in our judicial system, but that is at the top of my list for sure. So.
Yeah, so Northwest Bail Fund, they've been amazing, just really working with families that don't have any resources and getting these people out into safety.
Thank you so much for your time today and for really illuminating this. And it definitely helps us to look at not only this case, but every case with maybe a more finer tooth comb and understanding that what is being presented to you isn't always everything that's there.
Well, thank you for looking into this and having an open mind.
Yeah, of course. And if you have any other cases that you want to talk about, we would be happy to anytime.
Okay. All right.
All right. Well, stay well through all of this.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, that was seriously intense.
I legitimately was speechless and shocked and taken aback by much of what Rachel shared with us today.
It reminds me how we did that previous case where you said you went into it with a preconceived idea of what the case was, the
Christmas bombing. Yeah.
And then you came out of it with a whole new perspective. It's amazing how a half hour with someone can really shed a light on all these gaps that you didn't realize were there because you think you had a strong knowledge of a case.
Yeah. It makes me even more curious of what the prosecution presented to remove that reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's nothing but reasonable doubt right there. And again, that's not to dismiss the victims or to say that he's innocent or anything like that. It's just how fascinating.
That's what makes me think how important it is to try to get your hands on transcripts.
Yeah.
But these kinds of cases they're hundreds of thousands of pages, but they're not always readily available or they cost a lot of money. But it also makes me just really want to talk to a juror on this case.
Yeah. Well, and when we do our research, sometimes we get police reports, not always. And we go through
media clips.
We go through newspaper after newspaper after newspaper, interview, everything we can find, documentaries, anything related to it. And that still isn't going to tell the whole story. Nothing really will. But was it so simple and did it weigh so heavy of his DNA was there? Because this wasn't 30 years ago where you had CSI and all of this ingrained
People
where
know what DNA is,
and
right?
DNA equals guilty. I mean, let's be honest here.
It also equals unique. So when you're hearing there's DNA evidence leading to this person, your first thought is, well, then they did it. They're the only one with DNA there. But that's not what we just found out, is it? There's
and I don't know that I'm convinced that
of course
he
not.
Wasn't. And obviously that's one side and the prosecution's the other side and the truth falls somewhere in the middle. But definitely, if I was on a jury and I'm hearing, his DNA was there and all this stuff, and there's no proof of them having met up, and you know what the prosecution's telling you, but then on the other side, the defense is telling you,
there's another profile.
Well, I think she was saying that was
came later.
After, but still, there was
enough
no
other
there.
Connection. So if you have a body, you have the DNA, he's admitting to having sexual intercourse with her. There's nothing else connecting so that I could see why.
And as I was researching, I was kind of surprised that there weren't more cases linked to him because of the zip ties, because of the manner, like I said, and like how the detective said it looked like someone that had been in prison because of how he was muffled and stuff. So it was surprising. I was just like, oh, he's just this guy.
Let's talk about that though, because she made a couple comments about something you brought up, the violence with the sister.
Right.
And she talked about it having more weight than it should have. I did find information online after that call.
Yeah.
Where there are multiple people in his family saying not only did he abuse his sister, she said he kicked her in the face multiple times, that there was sexual assault. The father said he was violent. It looks like there was some other incidents when he was younger. So
yeah, I saw where two different sisters said, and again, it just comes down to human nature and human error and what you perceived, or maybe as soon, how would our perspective of Josh, how would that change if he got randomly he's walking out to go have a smoke and he gets arrested for murder, how would
And I'd
that
be
change?
like, yeah, he's a scary guy, man.
But it would change your perspective. You'd go, oh, these little things. I mean, it would
Now
be
every
very
little
easy.
thing you might have dismissed is what
Right.
you're saying.
Yeah, like oh yeah,
Yeah, I could see that. Well,
my brother and I, we wrestle and punch each other on the arms and whatever and play around. If I got arrested for something aggressive and violent, that'd be very easy for someone to say, oh, yeah, they were always fighting. She was physically aggressive. So it's very easy to kind of change how you look at something.
And we can't discount someone's ability to tell a good narrative. So when you look at a state prosecutor, they're typically very good
They're
at painting
storytellers.
the picture that they want the jury to hear and see. So I have to imagine that happens on both sides.
Absolutely.
You pick your argument and you defend it tooth and nail, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody's very, very good, charismatic, and charming and can paint a good picture as a human, we're inclined to pick the more believable story. Even if there is reasonable doubt, it's not perfect, right? She even mentioned, you're innocent until proven guilty, but we all watch crime shows and we aren't like that.
Yeah.
And
I found it very fascinating too how she said she didn't have that separation. We kind of talked right after. I would imagine that would be not only just a coping mechanism, but also you can't go there. You can't. You're fighting this fight, and that's where you're at for both sides. And so that truth your truth that you are putting together with the evidence has to become the truth so that you're fighting that, so that you're genuinely fighting it for what you believe. I think
there's also a sense of like there's an expiration date on that type of job too. You see people, she's also moved into a management path. There are people who stop being public defenders because it is too emotionally hard. So I guess it's part of your training really to be able to do your job and function and not be too bogged down by emotion. But also somebody can be very different from you and what we would deem a bad person. You can still be human and compassionate even though you disagree with them.
Well, and we've heard that from authors and survivors where it's, once I got to know this serial killer behind bars, they were so charming or kind or, so you're going to have different sides to every person. And that's, when she was saying no one ever knew him to have these items or do anything with guns or anything like that. It did kind of pop in my mind in that second of like the BTK killer, because he was the church going, so, and then that's when you're sitting there in
with
the
his
jury.
daughter, they were buddy. Guess what? Her mind was blown.
Yeah. So that's where the hard part, if you're in the jury and you know anything true crime, your brain's going to go back and forth. Yeah. So I don't envy the jury. I don't envy a single person in any
some
kind
of
of
the
case
hardest
like that.
work in the world, I think, is around these types of things because it's constant lie after lie, truth after truth.
And when you feel like you're genuinely fighting to not only save someone's life, but to point out and say, there's probably a different killer, potentially serial killer. Like, I'm trying to help the family. That would be so hard to go in because, of course, she's going to be looked at from the family as the villain.
Right.
You're protecting this
and
monster that
wants
destroyed
to
our lives.
Close a chapter on these cases and believe the person's put away. So she really gave us some food for thought, I think, on what is it we're actually reading, what evidence really is pertinent, and was there reasonable doubt? And he is going to go for an appeal, and it sounds like they have a fairly solid case to move forward with.
Yeah, you would hope for anyone, because what I break it down to is it could be anybody. I mean, this could be you or me, and you get picked up on something because you happen to throw a piece of gum or whatever, and
have
you
sex
would
with the wrong person.
Yeah, and you would hope that this other evidence would be acknowledged to say, at the very least, to get a new trial.
Yeah.
To bring those things in. And that's the thing too, this game of what can be brought in and what isn't, as opposed to just here's everything, because that's the case, is everything, instead of that can't, because I'm the judge and I'm in the mood for that today.
I'm really curious if they can get more from this partial profile. I think that's going to be huge for them if they have the technology to do that. So I wish him
it's
luck
not another 30 years.
If he is innocent, that he gets his day in court to resolve this, but also that the family actually gets closure. Yeah. And doesn't have to go through appeal after appeal if that is the case.
Yeah, either way that justice is served.
Yes.
That he's either released because he is innocent, or they can find concrete evidence
keep it
that
open.
he isn't. So.
Yeah.
But again, thank you so much to Rachel Ford for her time today to really shed light on the other side of this story. William Earl Talbot II was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences. During the trial, Chelsea, William's second cousin and uploader of the DNA which caught him, went to the court to meet the families. She, on behalf of her family, presented flowers to the families that had been affected by the tragedy. She expressed her condolences, which were met with understanding and gratitude.
Yeah, without her uploading, no one would have ever known.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating to see, these genealogists that sit and connect and go, okay, this DNA means it's this family member, and they're, for this they were saying, okay, he's a white male, this build, and then to go back and go, okay, so second cousin, so it's going to be over here, and and then
bam,
yeah,
likely candidate. I like the ones where there's multiple brothers, so it gets even a little trickier, where they're basically getting all their DNA.
Yeah, and to trace them down, and just to keep this case. I think of all, with the exception of child pornography or something, that cold cases would be some of the most difficult to work on.
Yeah.
You would just feel lost and frustrated and waiting for technology to catch up. And
from my experience of talking to a few that we were looking at working with, it's a short-lived position. They tend to retire quickly.
Oh, okay.
So they take it home. They take on the family. So one woman I recently spoke to calls the family every year to catch up and
see how
here's what I know, here's what I don't know. And unfortunately right now it's what I don't know, but it's like extended family to them because they get so involved.
Yeah.
So I imagine it is hard to not take that home with you every night and feel like it's on your shoulders at that point because no one else could do it.
That was like that episode of Forensic Files where it was the cold case with The Rock. And he said, that he had to solve this because he had brought her home every single night. And speaking of Forensic Files.
Oh, my God.
I know. That worked out really well. In February of this year, Murder in the Rain was invited by HLN Network to attend the premiere of the new Forensic Files 2. While we were bummed Emily couldn't make it, although she would have died if she sat foot in our janky hotel room, so maybe it's for the best that she couldn't go. Josh and I attended and were lucky enough to get time with Bill Camp and Nancy Duffy. If you're a fan of Forensic Files, which, of course you are, be sure to catch all the new episodes, and I think they've all aired at this point, but they are on demand. And please go follow HLN on all the social medias. Not only is it a great way to get new information about true crime shows and podcasts, Grayson, who runs it, is just an actual gem of a human. We are so appreciative to HLN for reaching out to us for this opportunity. It really was the time of Josh and I's lives. And if you'd like to hear, plug your ears. If you'd like to hear more New York adventures, including interviews, an interview crasher in the most New York of fashions, and funny stories, please be sure to check out our Patreon for all of the content. We've got also, more bloopers, mini episodes, all the good stuff. But for now, here is our interview with Bill Camp and Nancy Duffy as we discuss the reboot and creation of Forensic Files 2. We are delighted to be speaking today with Emmy and Peabody Award-winning producer Nancy Duffy. We have Nancy to thank for Headline News becoming everyone's new go-to for true crime programming. Nancy has had a prolific career in production, covering President Clinton's inauguration, the O.J. Simpson trial, and working with illustrious names such as Dan Rather, Paul McCartney, and a personal favorite, Shepard Smith. And just when you think it can't get any better, we are also delighted to be joined by Tony Award-winning and Emmy-nominated Bill Camp, who is not only the new narrator for Forensic Files 2, but a star of stage and screen, working in television shows and movies from Rounders, Law and Order, and Boardwalk Empire to 12 Years a Slave, Lincoln, and Joker. Thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us today. We are huge fans of the show and cannot wait to see what the new Forensic Files brings for us. Nancy, Forensic Files is really kind of everyone's true crime gateway drug. So before taking over the helm, did you recognize the cult-like following that it has?
Of course, because Forensic Files runs on HLN night and day.
Yes.
Pretty much we could be called, FFHLN.
It's true.
And we love the show. Everybody loves the show. And to talk about what Paul Dowling thinks about the show, he really feels that it is the precursor of CSI. That CSI really was based on Forensic Files, and Forensic Files is really the real-life version of CSI, that they copied their whole idea on Forensic Files.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Bill, as you may or you will soon find out, that there is a cult following, especially in the true crime fandom world. And the late Peter Thomas was a big part of why Forensic Files was a big success. How do you envision making the new episodes your own?
Well, obviously, there's no way I could duplicate the excellence and the model that Peter Thomas is, and he's the mountaintop of narration. I would bring my own storytelling skills and make the succinct writing of the show and uplift the suspense and add what flavors I have to the new aspects of Forensic Files 2 and integrate, my skills with the wonderful production of this new reboot.
I'd like to also just add that Paul Dowling personally, wanted Bill as well. In other words, we searched and searched for somebody to take the place of Peter Thomas, just as Bill says, not to do an impression or impersonation of him at all. But Paul was really concerned about who would be the right voice for this, and we found Bill.
Excellent.
And he's awesome. And we're so glad to have him. And really, he is the perfect voice for Forensic Files, to take over that mantle.
Yeah, I cannot wait for tonight to hear that first episode. I think it's going to be riveting, to say the least.
And let me just add that it's a privilege and a thrill for me to be able to be a part of this.
You've done narration before, like the All Access Quest for the Cup film. You were a hockey fan going into that. Were you a true crime fan coming into Forensic Files, or is this kind of a new world for you?
Oh, yes, deeply addicted.
As we all are.
Yeah, no. I've been watching the show for many years, and I still watch it and spend at least an hour a day on HLN watching it for real. And I will watch it on my computer, or I'll watch it in Germany, or I'll watch it in Japan, or wherever I may be.
The world.
Exactly, and have been watching it for a long time. It's just it's kind of a perfect half hour if one has an appetite or a taste for murder and mystery.
Yeah.
And solving crime, which for me, I have to say, it's titillating for me because there's an element of fear and there's an element of terror to it, because it's like, I don't know how to articulate or what that is psychologically, but I'm one of those people that doesn't mind being scared or sort of gets excited by that.
There's a thrill to it.
And yet at the same time, it's true. And there are people in the story that are real people that I can relate to, like the cops and the scientists and the families and all of the people that are involved in the circumstance of this horrific event that I can relate to because they're real people. They're not somebody in a TV show. They're actual people that I feel a kind of, equity with in some way as a human.
Yeah.
And then I have the suspense of what the story itself is as it unfolds. And then I have the science. And that's really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And of course, the satisfaction at the end that someone's been brought to justice through the diligence and the the really painstaking hard work and the drive, whatever the engine is that drives these people to do these things, to solve these murders, to find solutions, to remain curious and remain, committed to a cold case that may be 30 years old. And
waiting for science and technology to catch up.
And the people that develop that science as well, knowing that it will be put to good use. Like the best of use,
right?
It's like the worst thing we can do to each other as human beings, right? But then this is also like the grace of being,
Yeah.
or the beauty of human beings is that they try and do right as well,
Yeah.
or we do. So, and you see that play out in 30 minutes, which is really quite awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great formula, and so how can it not be addictive?
And next thing you know, you go, wait a minute.
It is a gateway drug.
It really is. It really is. And my personal favorite is I have Sirius XM, which has headline news. And I'll be driving and be like, oh, I know that sound. Okay, this will get me through the rest of my commute. People are addicted to the show and have seen every episode with the idea of, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. What are some of the elements from the original show that you're holding on to? And what are you bringing to the series now to kind of bring it into the new millennium?
This is Forensic Files. I mean, we really set out to not change it. Mm-hmm. That was the whole point, right? We wanted to bring back Forensic Files. We didn't want to redo it. So the theme song that you remember at the top is the same song.
Oh, great.
The graphics are different a little bit. The images, right? Because technology, forensics has advanced. The format of the storytelling is the same. The way the acts lay out, the crime, the mystery, the forensic, the red herrings, and then ultimately justice. And but I would say obviously the cameras are different. The color is brighter. The sound might be clearer. And we have Bill Camp.
Right. So it's all
good.
The high-end version.
But it is, just as addicting. We have 16 epides this.
But no Trey Gowdy, right?
No Trey Gowdy.
He didn't.
No Trey Gowdy.
Make it.
Didn't make it. But we have 16 episodes this season. We have shot all 16. We've just tracked 13 and 14 today. And so by the end of next week, we'll be tracking probably 15 and 16, the final episodes of this season. And I have to say, these are addicting.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I watch them over and over and over. In many
Josh is nodding like, yep, I've heard it 1,000 times.
Not with Bill's voice, with different people. And you're like, oh, is this anything? Should I? And so then when you finally see it all together and Bill's voice is in and you have the color posted and the audio sweetened, it's fantastic. And this is really probably the same for every show. You look for 16 episodes, we looked for 40 because they'll fall through or something will happen. And so we found 40 stories that we all loved. Paul Dowling was involved in approving them. We were, improved them. And then we begin casting. So you have to reach out to the law enforcement. You reach out to the victims' families, et cetera. And then maybe this one won't work out or this one, or it doesn't time out. Eventually you end up with the 16. We go out and we shoot them. We shoot the interviews with the subjects first. We shoot the recreations last.
Okay.
We write the script, and then once we have a rough cut that's approved, we figure out, okay, here will be the choreography of the recreations. So those are shot last. And then Bill comes in at the end to do the tracks, and then we send to post for color correction and audio.
Yeah, that all makes sense. Get the story from the people first, process it down.
Yep. Because you don't really know, the story, but sometimes when you don't really know who, when you sit down to interview them, will really deliver the story that you thought they were going to.
Right.
Or maybe they left out a detail, and then when they're talking, they reveal it, and you want to get that in. So you really have to get your framework of the narrative down.
I have a question. From the original series, were there people that contacted you that were like, hey, I understand that you're doing another one. I have a great story for you. Or they had met, if it was a prosecutor or if it was an investigator or if it was somebody that had been interviewed in the original series, if they actually pursued you, were proactive about coming to you?
There were because, for instance, Parabon Lab, who one of the episodes, probably in the third or fourth week, is about this brand new technology that through touch DNA, they can create an image of the suspect. It's pretty spectacular. They had done many forensic files in the past, the original forensic files. And so when we talked about doing the new season, they came forward with this technology that they had that, we were able to build an amazing story around. Also, some of the law enforcement that had been in episodes in the past, they had these cases. They had a couple cases that they were like, if only Forensic Files was on.
Oh.
And so we were able to get a couple of those.
Oh, that's great.
And so I would say that among many crime shows, Forensic Files has one of the best relationships with law enforcement.
Yeah.
Because Forensic Files made a point of highlighting law enforcement.
The work they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they are really the heroes, the scientists and the investigators.
And they're the
are
ones telling the story. It's their
exactly
story to
right.
tell.
So they're very open and eager usually to share their stories. Or
We've
great
had that
cases.
same experience where we reach out and hey, would you talk to us about this case? And they're all about it, which is so great to hear from the people that actually know what they're talking about.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Instead of reading, a bunch
and some of them are really
articles
great storytellers.
Oh, yeah.
They don't think they will be, and they think, maybe on live television they wouldn't be, but when you're just sitting down with just a camera in their own environment, they're really quite good.
Yeah, and they have good stories to tell.
Yeah, they're very passionate about it.
Yeah.
So for both of you, what is it about Forensic Files that you think from teenagers to 90-year-olds and through all these years people have been drawn to so consistently?
I just think great storytelling.
Yeah.
Yep.
Isn't that really that from all through time, right?
Yeah.
It's great
It's the
storytelling.
storytelling.
That's
Yeah.
what I think. And for this for this show, because it's unique in that it focuses more on forensics. It's Paul Dowling always says, this is not a crime show, it's a science show.
Yeah.
And that's really the way he approached it.
All right. Question. As a professional, almost professional speaker, going into Forensic Files, it's a lot of scientific language. How did you approach, see, right there. How did you approach some words that were maybe, 16 syllables long? Do you have someone
You would be shocked. I just said that to him today. I read these
do you have like this
words,
expert come
I
in to
read
say?
these words, and I'm like, there is no way. And then Bill walks in, da-da-da-da-da. He just like
seamlessly.
No,
rolls off
she
his
knows.
tongue. I
We've
said to
now
him, I
done
go,
14 of these, so she knows like where to stroke me. And
But seriously, I am like, this guy's secretly a scientist because who knows how to pronounce
It's like I
this?
actually took some
No.
courses.
Sometimes when I read these, I think they're made up words.
Oh, yeah, like someone just
Well,
fell
they
on the
give me
keyboard.
I'm like, come on.
I get to look at the words a few times, but even then, it's like very rarely will I actually do what she says I do. I get like 3 or 4 shots at it, at least.
I kept,
As you know,
like, what was
some
that
of
word
those
today?
I couldn't.
See, spectrometry, like
And
Fourier. I was just like,
the
what
Fourier transform something
Spectrometer.
spectroscopy. See,
see
I
what I
can't
mean?
even do it at this
But I
point.
know, but, yeah.
But it's spectroscopy word is.
Oh, of course.
I've said like 10.
I said it 40
I
times
mean,
today.
I
walking
said
down
that-
the street.
No.
Exactly.
But I have to say
Rolls
at
off
least
the
once
tongue.
it's like spectroscopy
Like
is
every
like.
party
So now
I go
it's
to,
just-
that's all they're talking about.
No, I get a few whacks at it, and then
Yeah.
they give me the script at least a couple of days ahead of time. So there are some I'm like, and then they'll also forewarn me at the very top of what I'm sent. These are the words you need to look out for, and so they're all phonetically put out, like
Nice.
names and places and.
Well, a little bit of a
crazy
cheat
scientific
sheet, but other than that,
terms
you're
and
really
just
hard.
a professional that's
They're
really good at his
difficult.
job.
They're difficult. They're
I
made
go
up
very
words.
slowly, and I practice over and over slowly, and
Right.
then I transmit
Until
it
next
up.
thing you know, you just spectroscopy.
Because of
Spectroscopy.
the way he says it, it's like, and then I picked up the dry cleaning,
No.
and then spectrometry, and then I had broccoli. I'm like, what?
Right.
Yeah.
No,
Very
Nancy just
natural.
she just says slow down.
I get that from him.
Just slow down.
Hey, why don't you just slow that down a little bit?
Let me say actually one thing I did.
Yeah.
I was in Vancouver last week, and we were doing a couple of episodes remotely from a studio in Vancouver, and it was not one of those crazy words, those scientific terms. It was silver
Oh, Sienna.
Sienna
It was the
minivan.
Sienna minivan.
I
Toyota.
could not for the
It was
The
a
alliteration
life of
got
me
you.
Sienna
say gold
minivan.
Sienna minivan. Like
It
in
was-
the
that's true,
sentence,
that's
I
true.
could not put it in the phrase. And like no matter how I tried to phrase it,
Just wasn't happening.
it was like Sienna minivan.
Yes,
or
that's
so
exactly
it's
what
like it was like everything but, right?
Oh, that's great.
So the vowels were all over the
Right.
place. And then finally what I did was, I can't remember who you were with, Sarah and someone else, and it was like,
Brittany.
yeah, it's like, slow down. And I tried, I still couldn't do it. So what I did was I realized if I don't look at this string of 4 words and I cross them out and then I have them in my head instead of looking at them, instead of reading them, it actually came out.
Oh, that's interesting.
And
It's
then
like not this thing
in
waiting
the
for you
background,
to be
Nancy's
said.
like, yay.
I have that. I'm like, do I have to
Once
fly
I-
to Vancouver?
Once I got it,
Get the minivan?
once I got
I mean,
through it, it was
You've already
finally.
done spectrometry. I mean,
And then
like-
after that, you saw them everywhere, right? Just silver minivans.
I did
haunting
actually. I
you.
did. I said we were driving to Whistler, and I was like, "Look,
There
that
it
car,
is.
I couldn't pronounce that."
It's haunting me.
Yeah.
That's
forgot
great.
about that.
So on a personal note, and for both of you, it's definitely been an interesting challenge for us to be in telling these very difficult stories and recognizing, like you said, there are real people here, the victims, the families, the police. How do you guys find kind of that balance of entertainment and recognizing, the material? Because that's definitely something we're always working on. Has that been an issue for Forensic Files of, kind of the glorification or sensationalizing, anything like that?
I think it's true that some shows do seem sensational.
Mm-hmm.
I do not think these shows are.
Right.
They're very much focused on the science, the investigation, and I think they're very respectful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it has such a great reputation
Yeah.
all these years, because you couldn't do this. They've done over 400 episodes before we came along. And you wouldn't be able to still reach out to the same law enforcement, the same science people, and if you were burning people.
Yeah. I agree. And
think that's
again, that's
important.
why it's the gateway drug, because it has that
Exactly.
respect. That's something definitely with 800,000 true crime shows and podcasts and every, and how people handle it really makes a difference as far as that respect for what you're talking about.
Very much so.
All right. Well, finally, do either of you have a favorite episode, either that you're very excited that's upcoming in the new season, or from the 400 of the past that really stuck with you or made an impact? Or
God, that's hard. I really don't. I
Yeah.
mean, I have a handful, and I think now I'm so focused on these new episodes because the other episodes I've seen so many times that now these are more exciting
Fresh
to
and
me
exciting,
because
yeah.
they're new, and so I think these are really, really good episodes. There's really none of the 16 that I would be like, oh boy,
right.
Truly.
Yeah, I can't. I mean, it's hard. It's impossible to say, oh, this is more interesting, or I find this one. They're all compelling. They're all totally compelling. And I was just trying to run through in my head 2 ones from the original series. One thing that does, I have to agree with what you're saying, is that it's so respectful. There's it's just that respectful to the families. I feel like when I watch the show, I'm over and over just so there's a level of, I don't want to say
Sensitivity.
yeah, that's treated, and the families are allowed to sort of express themselves too in ways that I find also respectful. Or if they don't want to, or if it's, it may not even, but there's something about this show that's quite moving. And I think ultimately when we get to the end of an episode and there is justice served, because I think it's important to tell these stories.
Absolutely.
And I think the families also have some benefit, I think, in being able to actually, for the recognition of what happened. Because we do move on so fast to things, or we forget, or the cases go cold, and then it's sort of in this ambiguous, lost place. And that's one thing that's so great about this particular show itself, is that there's remembrance, and there's respect, and there's something inclusive with the rest of the family, whether it's parents or brothers or sisters, that you realize,
And there's justice.
Yeah, exactly. And that educational piece, and that, almost, you want to say almost deterrent, so many shows where it's oh, look, here we're glamorizing Ted Bundy once again. Whereas you guys, and look at how hard these people are working to create even better science to catch you to, make this stop. So
how many times we've heard they could have gotten a divorce. You killed her instead. What? I cannot tell you. It's like every other episode.
It seems a lot easier.
Didn't want to pay the money.
So he do the paperwork.
Right.
Alimony. I mean, really? I don't know.
Yeah, there are easier ways.
Is it really that expensive to get a divorce? I don't know. Just saying.
Paperwork.
I get.
Paperwork, prison.
I don't know. Murder, divorce. Nah. Whatever. What's a little cyanide?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like that should be a tagline to Forensic Files.
Yeah.
What's a little cyanide?
Exactly.
Excellent. Josh, did you have anything to?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yes, I do actually. I have a question about The Outsider.
Sure.
Ooh, that is so scary.
I love it. It's great. It's a
Love
great show. I was wondering if you were drawn to it as a Stephen King fan, or if it's the writer, the person who wrote like the teleplays for it, like Richard Price. Yeah, 'cause he did The Night Of as well.
He did
right?
The Night Of. Yeah.
Was it that, or are you like one of Stephen King's like
Both.
constant readers? Do you read his books?
Both of those things.
Yeah.
It was a banquet of reasons why I would say yes to that job.
Ben Mendelsohn, probably.
Ben,
Everybody
who's a
in
friend.
That cast, yeah.
Yep. Being able to work with Ben, Julianne Yule, he's an old friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yule Vasquez.
Oh yes, yeah, he's great on.
Mare.
Yeah.
Known Mare for a long time. She and my wife are best friends.
Oh, she's great. Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh.
They've done a few things together. I think all of those things, but also Jason. Jason is quite brilliant, and also the DP for those first 4 episodes. I think.
The way it's shot is very interesting.
Yep.
I think
Igor shot The Night Of.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
He shot the first 4
Yeah,
of
it's a beautiful
that.
show too.
So I had a relationship with him. I had a relationship with Richard, and of course, I've been a fan of Stephen King's, and I think
do you have
I
a
was
favorite?
just
Favorite novels?
What was I saying earlier? I'd like to do The Shining on stage. I'd like to do that as a stage version.
That's
interesting.
And I think it could be done. And I don't know if it was because that was my first. I read it when I was 11, I think.
That's when I started too.
Right?
Yeah. I read
I think
The
I was
Stand
11.
when I was 11. Yeah.
And that's where Portland came up.
Oh, yes.
Was the other Portland, though, because we were vacationing in the summer of 74, 75, something like that, when that book came out. And I remember reading it, and it had an orange cover, and it was. I was terrified, but I was 11 years old in this room in a beach house alone at night, and was like, so he's been, I would say that one obviously has always stuck with me in a way that the others, they all do, but in that it was my first, and I got to run into him.
Oh, really?
I never expected, being a part of, and what a privilege to be in that universe and part of whatever that mythos is of Mr. Mercedes and Holly and all that stuff. Yeah. So I ran into him on Madison Avenue.
You're kidding.
In the rain one day. And
Did
I passed
you speak,
him. I turned around and I ran back and I was like, Steven, my name is Bill Camp. And he was like, yeah. I was like, he was like, have you seen the episodes? And I was like, no, I haven't seen anything. I don't know. But I just wanted, and he was like, they're spooky. And then we started talking about the Red Sox. And it was like, but yeah, no, it was like, oh my gosh. The chances are, and to be able to say, I did that thing that you read.
Yeah, you're part of his universe.
Oh my gosh, it's like, and I think he likes it. From what I heard.
Thank you for.
I'm not going to tell you what happens.
Oh, don't, because now.
I do not want to.
But you probably read the book, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Is it?
I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
La.
Sorry.
No.
Thank you.
It's spooky.
Yeah.
It's Stephen King. It's spooky.
Yeah, it is spooky.
Once again, thank you so much to Nancy and Bill from Forensic Files 2 and to everyone at Headline News. We had such an amazing time. On top of that, we got to meet some awesome podcasters, so please take a moment to go check them out, give them a listen, give them a follow. That was Wife of Crime, 3 Spooked Girls, Matt with True Crime Deadline, and Forensic Miles. Also, if you are a fan of Forensic Files, which, go check out the Facebook page of Forensic Files fans. And it is run by a lovely lady by the name of Kimberly Plord. I hope I'm saying your name right, Kimberly. And it is also co-managed with some of the producers of the show. So it is legit. So go check that out on Facebook. And thank you so much for listening. And we hope you enjoyed this episode.
I hear nothing, nothing. If I can't hear you. Okay, I'm a liar. I have a Limp Bizkit CD. Feel like you're judging me if you think I wouldn't.
No, not at all.
Backward judge. Interesting.
The old double reverse. I remember all that.
Sounds like a position.
Yeah, the double reverse.
That's just normal. You reverse it, you're back to normal.
I, for some reason, turned the wheel. And so when they hit me, I ended up in the middle lane so that I wouldn't hit the car in front of me and stuff. And the first thing I did was take the front. It was back when I saw a removable CD, so it does steal my CD player.
Oh, yeah.
And I popped that off because I was bumping Limp Bizkit. And I was like, the police are going to be here. I don't need anyone hearing that. That's what I was listening to. So I popped it off and threw it on the ground. Oh no, I've been hit.
I like an oiled butt.
You just said butt so hard.
I like an oiled butt. All those baby Joshes everywhere.
Don't need it, yeah.
Little babies running around.
Yeah.
All swimming around.
They come out babies. Yeah. I gotta kill them all. Get back here. Did you guys say anything awful while I was gone about me? Because I was recording the whole time.
No.
The lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue.
The lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue.
The lips, the teeth, the tip of the dick. I said dick.
Yeah, I heard it. I heard that.
Extra cheese, extra mayo, add bacon. Oh my God. I used to wear this bleach blonde, chin length hair with these little bangs. And I just look at it oh, that's cute. No, just kidding.
You look good.
Are you not driving right now?
At all, no.
Oh,
I stopped a couple months ago, actually.
Yeah.
Months ago.
Oh, I thought I thought by choice then.
Oh yeah,
good.
Yeah.
I thought because of this whole
pandemic. Do you want to know why?
Because his wife is amazing and said, "Baby, I want you to chase your dreams and I'll take care of us as the breadwinner."
What?
Yeah.
That's so sweet. Now it's I have to text these bimbos all the time. You guys watching this? I got a real funny anecdote.
Hanging out with my drug dealing boyfriend.
I didn't write country.
We're dealing drugs and he's dealing with my heart.
I just liked him because he bought me
Hanging
stuff.
around with my drug dealing boyfriend.
And he didn't do drugs
My
either.
daddy's gonna find out and tear us apart.
You have a great career in country music ahead of you.
Thank you. Sahanich. S-A-A-N-H.
Wasn't it Saanich? Josh, you
Saanich.
looked it up. It was Saanich, wasn't it?
I didn't look up no Saanich.
Yeah, you read it out loud when you were looking up name.
I didn't look at no Saanich.
You were looking up Van Cullenberg.
Mm-mm.
Yes,
I looked up Van Cullenberg.
It's all recorded. I
Did
promise.
I look it up?
Yes, and you said it in passing. You didn't look up
I
the
think
name
it
of the
was
town.
this. Saanich.
This is the town?
Saanich.
But he had said it out loud when he was looking for Von Cullenberg. I'm just saying.
I think it was the video I played.
Christ.
No, it was him.
I found it. I'm sorry. I found it.
Because you were looking at it.
No, I definitely wasn't.
You were looking up Van Cullenberg and you mentioned it. I promise. I have a very good memory. How's it spelled?
S-A-A-N-I-C-H.
Just that long A.
Definitely didn't look that word up before.
You're right.
Oh, I am?
Yeah.
Oh, thank God.
I have a very good memory.
When that happens, I really doubt sanity and my mental faculties because I am like so forgetful now.
That is true. Even my dad picked up hitchhikers all the time with me in the car. So,
oh my Lord.
All the time. One time. I told on him and my mom got mad.
As she should have.
Fucking narc.
As a child and into adulthood.
What if it's spelled, it's pronounced like school? What if it's scarif?
Scarif?
Scarif.
Scarab beetle.
Scarab beetle. Detective Scarab beetle.
That's
from
probably
Egypt. My mother was a mummy.
The first thing Detective Sharif did was call
911 because she's having a stroke.
But I would like to re-record this intro because I could hear how nervous I was and I was talking a million miles an hour. Can I do that?
No.
Murder in the Rain is produced and edited by Josh McCullough. Written and hosted by Emily Rowney and Alicia Holland. Artwork by Jamie Costa. Music by Kai Pfeiffer at kyfifer.com. Check out our website, murderintherain.com, for additional information on all cases, a fun interactive map, and be sure to subscribe so you can receive our newsletter. Check out the Mad Props page for coupon codes from some of our sponsors. We love your reviews and seeing them on all streaming platforms, especially iTunes. And check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And suck my balls.
Please put that in.